You don't know that the internet is working until it's not, and then you're like, what's going on here?
Tom Warner is the head of blockchain at DoubleZero, and he left Coinbase to solve the one problem holding crypto back from dethroning Visa, the internet itself.
If the validator is in New York, you have a certain amount of time it takes to finalize that. If the next validator is really close to you, it might be quicker. So what we do at DoubleZero is try to eliminate the variance that the internet creates for crypto systems, and then increase the overall speed that folks submitting or receiving transactions can get them. I can't tell you what Apple stock is going to be in a week, but every major trading firm knows exactly how long it takes to trade an Apple stock. And that is not consistent in crypto right now. If my stablecoin use case scales to a billion people, is the actual internet the bottleneck from an experience that's fractured? Because at the end of the day, really what you're asking people to do is leave a centralized system for a decentralized one. And if the performance on the decentralized one isn't great, they'll just go back to the centralized system they're already comfortable with.
Catch the full strategy on fixing the internet bottleneck and preventing the centralized pivot with Drew Rogers and Tom Warner, only on Stable Dash.
All right, we are here for another session at Breakpoint 2025 with Tom Warner. I'm so excited for this. What is your official title at DoubleZero now?
Head of Blockchain Business Development.
Head of Blockchain Business Development. What is how many folks are on the commercial BD sales side right now?
The company itself is about 30 between the foundation and the labs entity. The business development team is lean. There's 2 folks responsible for BD, myself and another Tom, and then we have a whole host of go-to-market folks between marketing, content, user relations.
Awesome.
So we're lean, but effective.
Selfishly and personally excited for this because when I think about the experts in this world of even my own development with understanding staking and understanding some of the fundamentals around this industry, when we worked together at Coinbase, I always appreciated many of our just one-on-one conversations. Like, hey, I was just in this meeting. I have no idea what the hell that meant. Like, Tom, can you help me get up to speed? Like, you've always been so helpful to the market and to the people you work with on taking complexity and making it really understandable. So why don't we start there? Maybe give us you were doing so many incredible things at Coinbase. You were learning so much. You were leading so much. What was the journey into DoubleZero from there, and what attracted you specifically to go bet your career on building this out?
Yeah, well, appreciate that. Thank you. I think the journey into DoubleZero starts at sort of my career journey. So I grew up with 3 older brothers. 2 of my older brothers were traders. So right after college, I had the opportunity to intern on the New York Mercantile Exchange. So I got the job because I was tall and loud. And my job literally was to stand in the corner wearing like a fly fishing vest. And in all the pockets were batteries. So at the time, everybody on the Mercantile Exchange was trading on a tablet, like pre-iPad, like this Microsoft tablet. And they would run out of battery space. So they would like take a battery, someone would call me and I'd run over and like swap a battery in. That was my whole job. And at that point, I got a sense for like live trading in the real environment. I knew I wanted to be in markets, but I also knew I didn't have the stomach or the mathematical skills to be like a proper trader. So I went to Bloomberg, and it was a pretty interesting experience. Like, I started my career really at Bloomberg with a lot of folks who were interested in crypto. This is pretty early. This is like 2013. And at the time, there was kind of a very palpable feeling of like dislike for crypto, right? There were traditional financial services folks, we would bring up Bitcoin and they'd be like, you need to get out of here. Like, nobody's going to do this.
There's a reputational risk at that point to even like make that a thing about what you believe, or it was a really bold thing to get behind at that point.
Yeah, I told this story once before. So we did a project at Bloomberg, which is kind of like a Shark Tank type activity where they're like, hey, can you go out and try to find some new data point that the Bloomberg terminal should be covering? And this is like 2013, 2014, and being a foolish, naive early employee, I was like, okay, like Bitcoin exists. It's not on the terminal. There's price feeds there. Like, we should cover that. So I wrote a whole proposal, which was immediately rejected, but I didn't stop. I was very persistent, to the point where my manager at the time and an individual from HR scheduled a meeting with me to ask me, like, why do you know about this? What are you doing with the system? It's only used for illegal activity. Ross Ulbricht is going in jail. And like, that was the moment where I was kind of like, hey, I really like crypto, and like, it's ruffling the wrong feathers. Like, maybe we're onto something here.
So that was validating.
Yeah,
to
in
see
a way.
That sense of like, maybe misunderstanding or misconception around it?
Like, I'd like to say like, oh, I knew at that moment I wanted to buy a bunch of Bitcoin. I didn't have enough money at that point. But what I did know is like, hey, this place, despite it being a great career, isn't for me. Like, I want to go work in a world where like new things are happening. So I got into crypto in 2017 through distributed ledger technology. I was working at an advertising platform that had a blockchain component underneath. And the general thinking with the platform was like to provide transparency of what people paid for ads, develop the ability to buy ads into the future. But again, like it wasn't as deep as I wanted to go in crypto. So I joined Coinbase in 2021 and then kind of just rode the wave there for a while. My responsibility at Coinbase was on the staking business, specifically looking after new networks. So how did Coinbase identify upcoming blockchains and determine, is this a good candidate to build infrastructure for, primarily staking and custody infrastructure, and can we position that to end clients? And to your original question, like in order to do that, it took a really concerted effort to understand how all these things work, right? Not only to see what the business case is, but also to communicate it back within the company to people who don't really understand what an emerging L1 is trying to do.
And how did that, so the process of kind of maybe it's similar. Obviously it's, Coinbase is different than Bloomberg, obviously in that way, but it seems like you've throughout your career, you started with that kind of hunch of this misunderstanding is opportunity, and looking around the corner of that a little bit. Was that how DoubleZero as a core focus for you started to become interesting, or like the market that you guys are solving is like maybe some of those misunderstandings, or I guess did you realize the opportunity for DoubleZero at Coinbase is maybe a better way to ask?
Yeah, I'll say like working at Coinbase was the highlight of my career. Like I absolutely loved it. I wasn't looking for another job. I came across DoubleZero through my research habits, right? Of like finding out new protocols, seeing what they're doing. And this was one that I had never seen before. So one of the things when blockchains launch is they kind of go through this sequence of fundraising, then they build a dev net, then they build a test net, and then they launch their main net. And what you'll see is like in a test net capacity, a lot of protocols can do phenomenal things, right? A test net is this closed off sort of scientific laboratory where you can synthesize transactions. And you could say this chain can theoretically do X amount of transactions and Y amount of finality. But when you get to the mainnet environment, when you put those protocols out into the real world, there's a couple things that happen. The first thing is like you can't synthesize users in the real world. So you need to have organic traffic flow. And that without a massive amount of users, you're not hitting the upper limit of what your protocol can do. The second piece is once you move a protocol into the real world, you're subject to the internet, like the public internet, as we call it, kind of propagating messages out. And what I learned in sort of analyzing DoubleZero was, hey, like networking is a constraint for a lot of these protocols to do what they're designed to do. And that was the moment when I was at Coinbase where I was like, hey, there might be an opportunity here to help all protocols kind of achieve their goal. Difficult decision to try to leave the economic freedom factory, but I'm happy about it and looking forward to kind of doing this.
What's been the so in DoubleZero, give that kind of internet routing efficiency pitch, and then bring us into what's getting you excited about Solana, about 2026, how you're thinking about your commercial focus in that way.
Yeah, I'll say like the networking backbone of crypto, I don't think is widely understood. I joke that it's sort of like good police work, right? Like you don't know that the internet is working until it's not. And then you're like, what's going on here? So for me, like the focus... Oh, before we get into focus, I think maybe we'll talk about how this works. So DoubleZero occupies the problem space between when a transaction gets sent and before it gets finalized. So from a user perspective, right, if you're a user on Solana and you want to do a swap in Phantom, you are going to press swap and then you'll wait a little bit of time and you get a confirmation back. But what's happening on the back end is that wallet is communicating to an RPC node. This sort of on-ramp into the blockchain saying, hey, Drew wants to do X thing. And then that transaction sits in a pending state and gets propagated out to a validator. So all of the transactions flow through an RPC and then they get sent to a validator to be finalized. And what happens is like, if you're in, we're in Abu Dhabi now, if the validator producing the block is in New York, that's a pretty substantial amount of like physical space between those two. So if you're reliant on the internet to communicate your transaction, meaning you submit the transaction, it goes in the Wi-Fi here, goes out of the Emirates, it gets picked up by an internet service provider in Europe, and then someone in America. It's not a straight line shot to the validator. And that sort of time that's happening in this process creates latency. It means that you're not going to be in the next block necessarily.
In my mind, immediately kind of goes to the difference between like an airdrop locally that we could do right now with an iPhone compared to like sending an iMessage to a WhatsApp user in a different market, like the different systems, or is that kind of a nice metaphor for this stuff?
Yeah, in some respect, like I think the internet is so good at so many things, right? It's phenomenally good at providing access to billions of people to communicate with each other. But the one thing that the internet doesn't do is guarantee you sort of an SLA in terms of how long things take. So if I text you, right, if I'm in New York and you're here and I send you a text, depending on the sort of routing table and the peering arrangements between different internet service providers, those texts may take a different amount of time each time I send it to you. Now, in like a non-transactional situation, it doesn't really matter. Like if you get my text message 50 milliseconds later, it doesn't matter. But the moment you're doing like transaction-based communication, stuff that carries priority and is reacting to external factors, you want to make sure that you have consistent amount of time it takes to execute. So in the crypto space, not even just specific to Solana, the nature of a decentralized system is such that the validator processing a transaction hops around the globe. So you have this compounding effect occurring where if you're submitting a transaction, if the validator is in New York, you have a certain amount of time it takes to finalize that. If the next validator is really close to you, it might be quicker. So what we do at DoubleZero is try to eliminate the variance that the internet creates for crypto systems and then increase the overall speed that folks submitting or receiving transactions can get them.
I think you've spoken on this a little bit, but there's a centralization of where these nodes are globally, at least right now. Is that true? Like where they actually live?
Yeah, so there's a spectrum depending on the protocol that you're working with. If you're launching a blockchain from scratch, you kind of have two options, right? As you think about deploying a blockchain, you have to ask yourself, am I optimizing for speed or am I optimizing for decentralization? Ethereum is arguably the most decentralized network because there's roughly 1 million validators all across the world. But the challenge with Ethereum is that those validators can't process as many transactions as a centralized entity. So we start seeing the habits shift a little bit from protocols that want to become a bit more centralized. If you look at some of like the major perps dexes, even L2s, right? The idea is if you could create a single environment, whether that's a data center or a sequencer that's processing all the transactions, you can increase throughput, but you're sacrificing decentralization to do that.
When you think about DoubleZero, I'm seeing very clear focus for like a traditional trading use case where slippage and finality is so important because of the natural volatility of an asset that's going up and down in value. Where does the stablecoin narrative or tokenization narrative affect DoubleZero from a from a BD focus, from a how you're thinking about the role or the tailwind that stablecoins have for your business? Like, what does that look like? How do you even think about that?
Yeah. So when I say transaction, like I think the first use case for DoubleZero, and you're spot on, is like, hey, the internet goes faster and maybe I can trade quicker. But it is not a system that says like, hey, high frequency trading only works here, right? The aggregate benefit of DoubleZero is the entire network itself becomes faster and more efficient. And when I say more efficient, I mean, right, at the end of the day, there's two participants really in crypto. It's people trying to do things and people trying to understand what was done. Right. So like people trying to do things might be submitting a trade or it might be sending a stablecoin transaction. So DoubleZero helps to increase the speed at which the transactions occur. And that's the first half. The second half is like, okay, what just happened? Right. The way that proof of stake networks work is a validator that processes a transaction possesses the most information at that time. It's like, hey, I know what you bought and nobody else knows. I'm going to go tell them. And they propagate this message out to the world. So when you think about like tokenization or stablecoins, it isn't so much like, hey, I want to maximize on this arbitrage opportunity, but rather I want to make sure that the experience to get to a confirmation is as quick as possible. So if you're launching a stablecoin with the goal of like dethroning a credit card company from being like the world's settlement layer, you want to make sure that your transactions are consistent. Like one of the major things that we talk about is like traditional markets. So equities, FX, commodities, like major markets are excellent at predictability. I can't tell you what Apple stock is going to be in a week, but every major trading firm knows exactly how long it takes to trade an Apple stock. And that is not consistent in crypto right now. Because it's a decentralized environment, because each protocol is slightly different, you have a ton of variance on how long it takes to do things. So set aside whether you're speculating on a token or whether you're doing meme coins. We are just trying to bring a bit more consistency into how long it takes to do things.
And on the BD side, specifically for you, who are you talking to? Who are you selling or wanting to partner with? What are some examples of what that looks like today? And maybe a lot of the audience that we have right now are building and investing in the like payments and stablecoin infrastructure. So like, who would you be bringing this technology to? What are some examples that might be relevant to share there?
Yeah, sure. So DoubleZero is an agnostic network in the same way that like your internet at your house works whether your friends have an Apple phone or an Android phone. Right? The set of pipes that we have to communicate transactions and information in crypto works for any blockchain. Right now, we're live on Solana, but we'll move to any high performance network that's out there. So to answer your question as to like who are the users and the customers, within the Solana context, it is the infrastructure, meaning it is the validators that process transactions that are connected into the DoubleZero network. It is the RPCs that are propagating transactions that are connected into our network. Retail users are not necessarily like users of DoubleZero directly, but they benefit from it. Meaning like if Netflix came up with a new way to, I don't know, show you video in better quality, like you as a viewer of Netflix would just appreciate that this is a little bit better. Users of DoubleZero will feel it on the front end, or stakers will feel it from a yield standpoint. You asked about like what clients we work with, a variety of validator operators. We have 40% of Solana stake connected to the network, but we also have like a very robust pipeline of other protocols that are out there. So I'll say to your audience, like if you're thinking about deploying a stablecoin chain or tokenizing on any one network, you have to think about performance, right? Not so much, hey, like does this chain work from an architecture standpoint? But if my stablecoin use case scales to, 1 billion people, is the actual internet the bottleneck from an experience that's fractured? Because at the end of the day, really what you're asking people to do is leave a centralized system for a decentralized one. And if the performance on the decentralized one isn't great, they'll just go back to the centralized system they're already comfortable with.
As we wrap here, Solana has meant, at least right now for the business, super crucial, super integral to where you've chosen to focus. Maybe speak a little bit to why this ecosystem is where you've started and the role that Solana plays in the current state and the future state of DoubleZero.
So it was a conscious decision to start on Solana, and I think the real reason is, right, if you look at blockchains through the lens of who is waiting to do things, right? Like, is there a queue of transactions that are struggling to get finalized? And through that context, Solana was the obvious answer, right? It has the most transaction flow, has the most activity from like a user standpoint, a demand standpoint, but also like it is at the forefront of innovation, right? I think Solana has a very keen awareness of how to build resiliency and design the network in a way that 5 years from now, like the version you want 5 years from now is available today. And that's sort of what we're helping provide, is to say, whether 1 billion or 2 billion people come on to Solana, now there's an opportunity for everyone to transact in an efficient and faster way.
It's amazing. Final thoughts, final shill to the DoubleZero community, to the Solana community, ex-Coinbase community. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I'll say this. Like if you're a Solana token holder and you're staking your tokens for yield, you have to ask your validator, why aren't you connected to DoubleZero? Functionally, how this works is if you connect your validator to the DoubleZero network, you have a higher probability of receiving higher paying transactions, which carry a priority fee, which results in more yield back to you as a staker. So I don't think folks consciously understand that like yield from staking isn't this flat thing. It isn't to say like, hey, the network inflation rate is X% and I will get that. There's also an element of like, how good is your validator operator at optimizing for things like MEV and transaction flow? So when you think about like trying to get an edge still in like the relatively same risk environment, you should ask your staking provider, like, why aren't you on DoubleZero?
That's awesome. Thanks, Tom. This was fun.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
That was our exclusive conversation with Tom Warner from DoubleZero. Thanks for listening.